In the ruins of paradise, with the echo of judgment still hanging in the air, God spoke one sentence that changed everything. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Genesis 3 verse 15. Theologians call it the Protoevangelium, the first gospel. But hidden inside this single verse is a question almost no one asks. We know the woman's offspring. History, prophecy, and the New Testament all point to one person, Jesus Christ. But who is the offspring of the serpent? Before we can identify the serpent's offspring, we must understand the serpent itself. The Hebrew word is nachash. On the surface, it means serpent or snake. But Hebrew scholars point out that this same root carries two other meanings: a verb meaning to practice divination, and an adjective meaning shining one, related to the word for polished bronze. When we read that the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field, the original audience would have recognized something extraordinary. The serpent was not an ordinary animal. It spoke with divine knowledge. It challenged God's word with sophisticated precision. It was already in Eden, the mountain of God. Revelation 12 verse 9 eventually removes all ambiguity. The great dragon is called that ancient serpent, identified as the devil and Satan. The Apostle Paul warns in 2 Corinthians 11 that this same creature still disguises himself as an angel of light. The serpent in the garden was a supernatural being, a high-ranking member of God's heavenly council, who chose rebellion over worship. Now the key question returns. If the serpent is a supernatural adversary, who are his offspring? The research of scholars such as Desmond Alexander and Geerhardus Voss reveals that the answer operates on three levels simultaneously. Firstly, at the supernatural level, the serpent's seed includes demonic forces, the unseen powers of darkness that have corrupted human history from the beginning. Ancient Jewish texts like 1 Enoch describe the Watchers, fallen angelic beings, as a deliberate strike against the human race to prevent the promised seed of the woman from ever arriving. Secondly, at the historical and collective level, the serpent's seed is not a biological bloodline. It is a spiritual and moral alignment. Throughout history, every person who replicates the serpent's nature through deception, self-exaltation, and hostility toward God's people belongs to this lineage. 1 John 3 verse 12 calls them plainly children of the devil. Lastly, at the eschatological level, this lineage reaches its terrible climax in a single future individual, the Antichrist, the one whom Paul calls the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction. These three levels are not separate. They are a single, unfolding story. The very first pages after the fall tell us exactly what the serpent's offspring looks like. Cain. After God institutes the enmity in Genesis 3 verse 15, the very next chapter opens with murder. Cain kills his brother Abel, and the Apostle John, writing thousands of years later, does not call this a family tragedy. He says Cain was of the evil one. The Greek phrase is ek tou poneru, meaning he originated from. He belonged to the evil one. Early Jewish interpreters went even further. The Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, an ancient Aramaic expansion of the Torah, asserted that Cain was conceived through the angel of death, Samael, who rode the serpent into Eden. Most scholars today understand this not as a literal biological claim, but as the tradition's vivid way of expressing what John stated plainly. Cain's nature, his envy, his violence, his rejection of God's word, was the nature of the serpent made flesh. Cain became the archetype. After him, every murderer, every persecutor of the righteous, everyone who destroys the innocent because their own deeds are evil, is walking in the footsteps of the serpent's seed. Augustine called it the city of man, two cities, built by two seeds, driving toward two destinies. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The Bible is full of moments in which the seed of the woman delivers a crushing blow to the serpent's representatives. Jael, a woman, drives a tent peg through the skull of Sisera, the commander of an army that oppressed Israel. David, a shepherd boy who would become king, strikes Goliath in the forehead with a stone, then cuts off his head. The giant wore scale armor like a serpent and defied the armies of the living God. These are not coincidences. Scholars like James Hamilton Jr. have shown that the inner structure of the Bible deliberately echoes the head-crushing promise of Genesis 3 verse 15 at each turning point of redemptive history. Every partial victory is pointing forward to the final one. At the cross, the two seeds met in their ultimate confrontation. The serpent's seed, represented by the religious leaders whom Jesus directly called children of the devil in John 8 verse 44, handed the Son of God over to death. The woman's heel was struck. Jesus suffered. Jesus died. But in that very wound, the serpent received his fatal blow. Hebrews 2 verse 14 says that through death, Jesus destroyed the one who holds the power of death, that is, the devil. Colossians 2 verse 15 says Christ disarmed the powers and authorities, putting them to open shame in his triumphal procession. The verdict was judged at the cross. The execution awaits the final judgment. And before that final judgment, the serpent's seed will produce one last, terrible offspring. Paul describes him in 2 Thessalonians 2 as the man of lawlessness, operating with the direct supernatural power of Satan, performing counterfeit signs and wonders, even sitting in the temple of God and declaring himself divine. This is the same pride the serpent planted in the garden. You will be like God. In Revelation 13, John sees him as the beast, receiving his throne and authority directly from the dragon, the ancient serpent. He is the final and fullest manifestation of the serpent's seed, the dark counterpart to the incarnate Son, but his end is already written. Revelation 20 verse 10 tells us the ancient serpent, his beast, and his false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. The head-crushing decree in Eden is completed. Genesis 3 verse 15 is not a footnote. It is the thesis statement of the entire Bible. Two seeds, two cities, two destinies. The seed of the woman bleeds to victory on a cross. The seed of the serpent burns in final defeat. And every generation must choose which lineage they belong to, not by blood, but by faith, by allegiance, and by whose word they believe. In our next episode, we will examine the very first test of that choice. Why was Cain's offering rejected by God, while his brother Abel's was accepted? The answer runs deeper than you might think, and it changes everything about how we understand worship, faith, and the serpent's first successful disciple.